of an evolution than a revolution. Okay? So there were some big time changes that occurred after the American Revolution or American evolution. And, it does pave the way for some new democratic ideas as you do see a weakening in the aristocratic classes. Why do you think, first off, what is an aristocrat?
High status person?
Yeah, mainly due to their wealth. That's right. So, which people do you think during the American Revolution were the aristocrats? Were they patriots or loyalists? A significant portion of them are loyalists. And as we know, a lot of the loyalists, they either, went back to England or they, are just kind of keeping to themselves. So you see a weakening of the wealthier portions of the population and a strengthening of like your average everyday soldier, veteran, farmer. Okay, so that is very democratic. Okay, now what was the government that was the first attempt at government created during the American Revolution? The Articles of Confederation. And the Articles of Confederation was, in a word, weak. Who had the power? Individual states. Very good. Individual states had the power. Each individual state, you pick a state. Rhode Island. Rhode Island was more powerful than the federal government. Any state was more powerful than the government of the Congress of the Articles of Confederation. Okay? And a lot of the states did things to reduce property holding requirements. Many states said you no longer had to be a property owner to vote. You could vote if you were just a merchant. You could just live in an apartment or be a renter. Or you could be an indentured servant and vote. Okay? Now you had to be white and you had to be a man. But at least they eliminated that property holding requirement in many states, which increases democracy. It increases democracy. More people have power to the people. Okay? Now, in addition to this, we also see many states fighting to preserve a separation between religion and government. And one of the people in the largest states responsible for that is Thomas Jefferson, as he, along with a few other Virginians, craft a document called the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. He wrote this for his home state of Virginia. And what it does is it guarantees freedom of religion in the state of Virginia. So what was going on before in Virginia? They actually had the colony of Virginia had its own religion. And you had, that was the official religion of Virginia. And it was the Church of England. That was the official religion of England, or of Virginia.
What did this guarantee?
This guarantees religious freedom. And Thomas Jefferson, he does this not long after he wrote the Declaration. It was drafted in 1777. So, 1777. That's correct. So very early on in America. Now, who did this grant religious freedom to? Everybody in Virginia. What if you're Catholic? Yeah. Jews? Yep. Protestants of all denominations. Yep. Everyone was given religious freedom. And he does this with a couple of ideas. One is called free exercise. Is that where you can go to the gym and pump out? It doesn't cost you a dime? Free exercise? No. Free exercise says that you can practice any religion you want without government interference. You want to go home and bite the head off of a chicken and call it religion? Go for it. I'd recommend getting some shots first, though. You never know. All right. The other one is called the Establishment Clause. It's Santa's cousin. And what the Establishment Clause says is that government can't force you to go to a particular church. So not only are you free to practice the religion you want, but the government can't tell you anything about what church you go to. Like it was before. Hey, Church of England is the one we like. That's what was going on. Both of those things are part of the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. Who cares? Why is this important? Sophie. Boom. These two clauses that Thomas Jefferson writes and puts into the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom in 1777 are basically verbatim, which means word for word, part of the First Amendment of the Constitution that gets created 13 years later. So this was an important document. It is a precursor to the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which hasn't been created yet. Okay? In fact, it's one of Thomas Jefferson's most proud things. On his epitaph, you guys know what an epitaph is? What's an epitaph? It's written on his gravestone. His 3 greatest accomplishments. What do you think they are? Writing the author of the Declaration of Independence. Obviously. Author of the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, and founder of the University of Virginia. UVA, Charlottesville. That's he. Cool. You were born very close to Thomas Jefferson's house. That's cool. Could have been your neighbor. All right. Okay. So, this was and all of this increases democracy. Okay. Now, that being said, several northern states do abolish slavery and or outright just get rid of it. And any slaves that were in their territory when they created their own state constitutions, many of them emancipated their slaves, which increases democracy. Not so in the South, okay? No states in the South. In fact, many states in the South created laws that discriminated harshly against slaves, and even discriminated harshly against free black Americans. Like they made laws that discriminated for the sole purpose of discriminating against skin. Many southern states even had laws that prohibited interracial marriage. Not allowed. So, before our nation even gets on its feet, you see that divisive powers are at work, and it's ultimately going to lead to a struggle. But that's a theme in American history. Struggle. All right? Okay, so we create the Articles of Confederation. Now, this was created, I'm kind of going back and forth a little bit here, time-wise. Thomas Jefferson's writing his Virginia Statute 1777. This was also adopted in 1777. This was the active government that we had for 12 years. And before we had the Articles of Confederation, the Second Continental Congress was meeting. But really, it was just the 12 or the 13 colonies that acted like free and independent nations. Each state, colony, had their own money, had their own militias, had their own navies, had their own tariffs. Like they would tax each other and have tariffs on each other's states. And like whenever you went from one state to another, you had to exchange your currency because your Virginia money wouldn't work in North Carolina. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? But that's how it was. So, in nearly all respects, the 13 the 13 states acted as though they were their own countries. And that's kind of how they wanted it. So, the Articles of Confederation is really our first attempt by the 13 states to create a national government. It is created in the heart of the American Revolution in 1777. And it is kind of referred to as a firm league of friendship. A firm league of friendship among the states. It asks the states to cooperate together. Hey guys, can't we all just get along? And, I'm sure it worked great, right? It only lasted for a few years, right? There's a reason for that, okay? And like I said, if you could draw it up and describe the Articles of Confederation in a single word, it would be weak. Weak sauce. Super weak. I mean, weak. Weak like me. Barely get around weak. Okay? So, tell you a little bit about it. It was unicameral. What does that mean? Only one camera? Camel with one hump? What's unicameral? One house. It had a one-house legislature. Compare that to what we have now. Two. Bicameral. We have the House of Representatives and the Senate. They only had one. It was unicameral. All right? How many people were a member of our federal government? Legislature.
One.
Good guess. It's a good guess. But the entire federal government of the United States and the entire Articles of Confederation legislature, how many lawmakers were there?
25.
That's a really good guess. It's lower than that.
12.
Higher.
13.
13. How do you think we got 13?
Person.
One person per colony. I'm sorry. One person per state. We are the United States now.
So there's 13 people in the legislature?
That's right. So we have one house, one legislature, with one vote per state. So, Virginia, how many votes do they get? One. Rhode Island, how many votes do they get?
One.
Virginia bigger than Rhode Island?
Yeah.
Only about 100 times. Is that fair? Virginia doesn't think so. Rhode Island think it's fair? Yeah, they dig it. All right. So that's a limit. That right there is kind of weak. 13 people in the entire country make decisions for the federal government. But as far as the decisions they make, they really can't, because the power of this government is intentionally limited. It's weak. It's weak. All right. What is something that both the federal government and state government that we are under, what is something that they do and do a lot of? They tax the heck out of us. The Articles of Confederation has no power to tax. They got zero tax money. Zero. They were not allowed to tax. So how do they get money? Hey, Massachusetts, you float me a few bucks? Hey, Virginia, we kind of need to get some stuff done. Can I have some money? Do the states have to give it money? Nope. They got money from the states. Okay? All right, so that right there, if Congress has to ask the states for money, what's the likelihood they're going to get it? Not good. Not good. Okay? So, this shows that our states are way more powerful than the federal government, and this is going to lead to some serious problems because they did have a few powers. The Articles of Confederation government could raise an army, they could raise a navy, they could declare war. They had some power. What kind of army are you going to raise with this much money? $0. You're not. You're not. Imagine a government, a federal government with no army, no navy, no military. There were soldiers, but who paid them? The states, each state had their own army, really, their own militia. There was not really much of a federal army to speak of like we have today. Okay? Think of it as like there's no army, no navy, no Marine Corps, none of that. But every state has like the National Guard.
That would suck.
That's how it was. That's how it was. Okay? That causes some massive problems. It's actually the main cause of it failing. All right? So, because of these weaknesses, our new country really struggled to come together. Okay? We were it was just weak. That being said, it didn't completely, it wasn't a total failure, only a mostly failure. There were a couple things that the Articles of Confederation did pretty well. All right? One of them has to do with the new territory. Do you remember this? The Treaty of Paris of 1783? What was one of the awesome things that we got from the British as a result of it? All this big area of pink land that more than doubled the size of our nation in 1783. Well, the Articles of Confederation came up with a plan for divvying that out. They actually came up with a couple of them, and we're going to look at it, okay? So, the Land Ordinance of 1785 was created by the Articles of Confederation government. And it is a success. This is a total success. It is one of their most far-sighted pieces of legislation in American history. It was created by the Articles of Confederation government. Yep. And it's really one of the only things that they did well because they didn't have much power. Okay, so we recently, just 2 years prior to this, acquired, for the lack of a better word, a buttload of land. Like we doubled the size of our country. And we had to come up with a plan to what are we going to do with all this land? And so the Land Ordinance of 1785 comes up with a plan for this part of it, the northwestern part of it, okay? And I don't know if you guys can see my cursor. Let me get the laser pointer. Yeah, this orange territory, okay? That's what the Land Ordinance of 1785 does, all right? And what the Articles of Confederation government's going to do is they're going to survey this land, and they're going to do it into blocks, okay? Blocks like this, square blocks, okay? Each block is 1 square mile. So they would sell off townships, and each township would be 36 square miles. Because, I don't know if you've ever been to these states, they are flat. It's not like here. They're not like gullies. And they got some rivers and stuff and water, but it's flat. It's not as difficult to survey. So they're going to 36 square miles. And they were going to start selling off these parcels of land. Now, when I say they, I mean the article, like the federal government, is going to start selling this land. To who? Settlers. Americans. And what are they going to do with the money?
Build an army.
Good guess. That would be nice. What was another part of the Treaty of Paris? We had to pay off our debts. And so they're going to use the land to pay the debt. Pay off our national debt. So they're going to start dividing these townships into 6 by 6 blocks, which each block is 1 square mile. And once they do this, they started to make some rules about what these blocks had to be used for whenever the population of one of these 36 square mile blocks reached a certain amount. Like, once the population reached a certain amount, they had to use one of these blocks for school. They had to build a school in one of them. Then they had to build a public building, like a town hall. Like, there were requirements. And all of these things are great. They're great for democracy. A school is important. Why are schools so important in a democracy?
So people learn how to read and write.
Yeah, why is it important to be halfway intelligent. Who's in charge? The people. If you have a bunch of stupid, uneducated people making decisions, you're going to have a bunch of stupid, uneducated decisions made.
Right now.
So you have to have an educated population of people. So education was important. And the people that crafted the Articles of Confederation, they crafted this land ordinance of 1785, knew that. All right? Okay, now another thing that this does is ultimately what is going to happen to this territory? Is it going to be territory forever?
No.
They're going to become what?
Colonies. Or states.
They're going to become states. They come up with a plan for how a territory goes from being a territory to becoming a state. It's the same plan that we use today. It's part of the Constitution. But it wasn't even, it was created long before the Constitution. All right? So, basically, when an area reached 60,000 inhabitants, 60,000 people, they could create their own constitution, a state constitution. And then fill out an application to the Congress and apply for statehood. So that's pretty much it. You had to have a population and you had to have a constitution created. You had to have a plan in place. Makes sense. You had to have a plan. All right. Okay, another land law that is established is called the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. So, I know this is super confusing because you got the Land Ordinance of 1785 and then you have the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. These two things are different. And here are just a few of the Northwest Ordinance kind of required that the states include these things in their constitutions. A trial by jury, public education, freedom of religion, and a prohibition on slavery. Slavery was not going to be allowed in those northwestern states, ultimately which become Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, parts of Wisconsin. These things were all had to be required because of the Northwest Ordinance. And this is all done under the Articles of Confederation. And I think we can all agree these are all good things. We all like these things. Okay? But ultimately we know the Articles of Confederation is not meant to last forever because it doesn't. Why?
It sucks.
Yeah. Something happens. Something happens. In the state of Massachusetts, there were a lot of, you kind of see another theme is a struggle between East, I guess for y'all it'd be East, and West. Okay? Who's living in the East?
Rich people?
Wealthier people, Bostonians, people that aren't having to, people that live by the harbor, make a living like that. Who's continually having to push further and further into the West? Not wealthy people. People who just want to try to find some land, become farmers, have a family. Impoverished people, backcountry pioneers. All right? It's hard to imagine. We think Massachusetts is a pioneer country, but it was. So, In 1786, the state of Massachusetts begins to put taxes on landowners. It's not, I pay taxes every year on my land. But these people, they're beginning to tax people on the western frontiers of Massachusetts. These are people who are subsistence farmers. What's a subsistence farmer? Tyler, you know what a subsistence farmer is? Put that way. Pay attention. What's a subsistence farmer?
You make just enough to like feed yourself.
Yeah.
Sustain yourself.
You're just, you need a pair of shoes, you make them. You need to eat, you grow the food, or you go hunt it, or you raise it in your backyard. So what are you not making? Money. Can you pay taxes and chickens and goats and horses? Grain? What do you got to pay taxes in? Money. So these impoverished backcountry pioneer subsistence farmers can't pay their taxes. What happens to their farms? It's called foreclosure. They're not able to make their payments. So, who are the people living out here? These wealthy people? No. A lot of them are American Revolutionary War veterans. They fought the American Revolution. They went home. They got their families. They're going to strike out and make a brand new life as Americans. And over time, after household after household, after farm is lost due to foreclosures, you get a vast population of disgruntled, violent men who are trained to kill. And they have a leader, and his name is Daniel Shays. And his followers are called Shazites. That's a cool name. Shazites. Sounds like German. Shazites! But these Shazites band together around American Revolutionary War veteran Daniel Shays in a number about 4,000. 4,000. And these Shazites rise up against the perceived injustices, against the government of Massachusetts, and go to an armory. You guys know what an armory is? What's an armory?
Where they hold supplies.
Yeah, what kind of supplies? Weapons. They go to a United States armory in Springfield and arm themselves. So now these 4,000 men who are angry and trained now are armed and trained. And so now they're on their way with a militia to go to the government, to go to Boston, and through force make the government give their land back. Through force, through violence. So the governor of Massachusetts, what's he do?
Run.
Okay, maybe. Before that,
Does no.
what would you do if you're the governor and you have a rebel militia trying to overthrow the government by force?
Arrest them.
Okay, you're going to try to stop them. So what is the mechanism that you're going to use? Okay. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call, hey, Articles of Confederation. I need troops, man. Send me some troops. We need troops in Massachusetts immediately. Right now. And the Articles of Confederation replies, sorry, bro. We're out. We didn't get any money, so we didn't raise an army. No army to be had. You're on your own. So he's like, okay, cool. No problem. I'll just call up my state militia. Guess who the state militia is? These people. The veterans. That's the militia. So he calls them. There's no telephones, okay? Nobody answers.
He writes.
Yeah, he writes. Hey, in case you didn't get the memo, Governor of Massachusetts, we're the ones coming to get you. So good luck stopping us. So ultimately, that means what is the government of Massachusetts now?
Screwed.
There's a name for it, and you're not wrong.
Oh, wait.
It's a mob. It's a mobocracy, ruled by the violent. It's like Walking Dead out there. Whoever has the guns and whoever has the power, they get what they want. Very American, right?
Yes.
Well, this is what happens. This is scary. This is anarchy. There is no government. There is no government.
It's just a man.
It is just a mob who, yes. Now, this mob, they actually don't, resort to violence. The governor of Massachusetts calls up a friend.
Who's the dude that you wrestled?
That would probably be a tax collector. Yeah. So the governor of Massachusetts calls up a friend of his and also a friend of these men. Who's he going to call? George Washington. And George Washington, with his own money, gets some fellow Virginians, goes to Massachusetts, and non-violently resolves the situation.
Are you sure that was non-violent?
It was pretty much non-violent.
Did George Washington?
No, there is no president.
Then who's in charge?
The Articles of each individual state. This is under the Articles of Confederation. It's not working, is it?
No.
It sucks. So what does this yes, Sophie?
I thought George Washington,
He was retired.
yeah, but I thought there was like a controversy because he got like so many troops.
He did.
2,000 or 3,000.
Uh-huh.
And people were like, that was too hard.
That's the Whiskey Rebellion during his presidency. Okay? All right, so what does this result in?
Yeah.
The people getting their land back?
Everybody's kind of like, this is not working. This is not working. Anarchy is not good. And so it kind of leads the people, the leadership of the United States, to rethink how things are going. So they call a meeting. And this meeting happens where?
Is that like Philly or something?
It does. And that meeting we now call what? The Constitutional Convention.
Is Hamilton in this one?
He is. So, every state chose representatives, except for Rhode Island. Rhode Island's always got to be different. Every state chooses representatives, except for Rhode Island. And these leaders were all appointed by the state legislatures, okay, amongst themselves. And the people who chose amongst themselves were elected by the people. So it's a democratic thing. And ultimately, 55 delegates finally convened in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And it's not just a one-day meeting, but it begins on May the 25th, 1787.
What year did you say?
1787. Mhm. Not long after Daniel Shay's rebellion is squashed. May the 25th, 1787 is when it begins. And, 55 guys is not a whole lot. They met in the same building that you guys remember we watched the video where they were reading the Declaration of Independence? That's the building. That's where they met. So it's not a really, it's a pretty good sized room, but it's for 55 guys, it's pretty intimate in quarters. All right. So sessions were so they go into Independence Hall. All the windows are shut. The doors are locked. And armed guards are posted outside. And everything that happens inside that building is completely secret.
When did it end? Like what day did it end?
At the end of summer.
So,
They're there all summer long. Now, when they first got there, the idea was to do what?
improve the articles?
Yeah, we want to make some changes. But according to the Articles of Confederation, the government itself, what was required to change the government? What kind of vote was needed? Unanimous. Is that possible?
No,
Why not?
There's
but they're all different.
Rhode Island didn't even show up.
Oh,
It's impossible. It is impossible. So they initially, pretty early on, go from instead of changing the Articles of Confederation, because legally we can't, let's just make something brand new.
maybe they should have all met in Rhode Island.
Yeah, maybe that. Then our first capital would have been Providence, I guess, instead of Philadelphia. All right. So, so they began to discuss things, and we're talking like these are like the heavy hitters of American history at this meeting. High caliber individuals: George Washington, Ben Franklin, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, Thomas wasn't there. Heavy hitters, big time founding fathers. France. Yeah, he and John Adams were in France.
He's always in France, though. I don't think
He loved the French. He was a Francophile. All right, so Thomas Paine was also in Europe. John Adams. They were like ambassadors trying to keep foreign help coming into America because we were struggling. Patrick Henry, remember him? Give me liberty or give me death. He didn't go. But Benjamin Franklin, there was a lot of big time American heroes there. Okay, and it's kind of probably a good thing that people like John Adams and Thomas Jefferson weren't there, because they were pretty imposing people, like as far as their will, and it allowed for these other people like James Madison, who were brilliant, to put forth ideas on their own behalf. James Madison is the father of the Constitution. And if those other guys were there, it would have probably been too overbearing for him, because James Madison's from Virginia. Thomas Jefferson's also from Virginia. Who you going to listen to? Some guy you never heard of, or the guy that wrote the Declaration of Independence? And I'm not saying TJ would have had bad ideas, but it allowed for James Madison to really flourish. Okay? Make sense? Yeah. All right, so these 55 men, they're all men, made up mainly of like lawyers, merchants, shippers, land speculators, bankers, moneylenders. They were not poor. They were wealthy men. Okay, they're not like your average everyday farmer.
they never talked about women, did they?
Not until the 1900s.
Wait, what?
Women did not get a political voice until like 1920.
Dang.
Just over 100 years, ladies have been able to vote. Okay? Of the 55 delegates, 19 of them owned slaves. With the exception of Benjamin Franklin, they were actually a pretty young group. Pretty young. Ben's old. Ben's like in his 80s at this point.
How many did you say owned slaves?
19. These men were young, but they were also experienced because they all worked for their state. And who had the power under the Articles of Confederation? The states. So they're used to authority. They're used to governing. And above all, they were nationalists. What does that mean?
They were all nationalists.
They were nationalists. What does it mean?
They put the well-being of the nation above everything else.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. They were interested in seeing the preservation of our whole country, not just their state. They wanted to see the United States survive, not just Virginia, not just Georgia. All the country. They were nationalists. And they had a plan for doing it. They wanted to use a long-forgotten form of government called a republic. They wanted to use a republic. Had a republic been used before?
Yeah.
Where?
Athens or Rome.
Greece and Rome. Thousands of years ago. Hadn't existed since then. Anywhere. In fact, it was the least common form of government in the history of humanity. The most common form was what?
Monarchy.
I'm the king. You do what I say or I kill you. Dictatorship, monarchy. That was the most common form. So they're going to try something that is like a science experiment. They got a hypothesis. They're going to take a guess on if it's going to work or not. They're not really sure. And in fact, we're still stirring the pot to see if it's going to work or not. We don't know. Okay? America is a experiment. We really are. Okay? We're an experiment in democracy. And, we're still very young, guys. We're very young. Other civilizations, they lasted thousands of years. Thousands. We're just over a couple hundred years old. Okay, so anyway, that's what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to forestall anarchy, and give the power to some of the people. Okay, so that's a good place to stop for today. And we will talk about how the Constitution comes about next week.